Is this one of your students? Is she glaring at you while you're explaining your free body diagram, or does she just look like that all the time in class? Maybe you think your students are having a blast in your class, but you're not really sure. Or maybe you're just not even sure what they're thinking while they're in there. If you're wondering what's going on inside your students' heads during class, all you have to do is ask them. I'm Laura-Hahn from the Center for Teaching Excellence and from iFoundry, and I want to talk about using informal early feedback. The first feature of informal early feedback is that you develop your own survey. That's the informal part. You ask items on there that you are particularly interested in or concerned about in terms of what's going on in your class. It's given typically 4 weeks or so, 4 or 5 weeks into the semester. And the other important feature of the informal early feedback is that it's anonymous. It's really important in this situation for students to feel like you won't be able to trace their comments back to them particularly, since you'll still be giving them grades. The most important feature and or characteristic of informal early feedback, and most important value, is that it opens up a dialogue between you and your students about how things are going in your class. They will appreciate the fact that you took the time to collect this information from them, and you'll also feel more satisfied about how things are going. The other interesting thing that we know from some research about informal early feedback is that if you collect it from your students and you act on it and take it seriously, there is a trend that your more formal evaluations at the end of the semester can also improve. So that might be an incentive as well. In terms of actually using early feedback, the first thing that you need to do is develop some survey questions. And in order to get started with that, you need to think about, ask the question of yourself, what do you want feedback on? Maybe you're concerned about the pace of your class. Maybe you're concerned about your students' perceptions of the difficulty of exams. Maybe you're trying something new in your class and you just want to get some feedback on how it's going. So you can develop questions that are very specific in order to help you diagnose how things are going in your class. I would advocate just no longer than a single page, one-sided form. Most professors use a few rated items. I wouldn't want to have more than maybe 6 or 7. So you can ask items that are rated on a scale. For example, rate the instructor's ability to explain key concepts, or rate the instructor's feedback to you on your exams. So you might want to think about some specific things that you'd like some feedback on. However, probably the most rich and useful information that you'll get from these feedback forms is by asking open-ended questions. And we try to follow the keep, stop, start model in these kinds of questions that you can ask your students. The keep part has to do with questions like, what should I keep doing during my class? What are some things that I'm doing as an instructor that are helping you learn well? The stop question is, what are some things that I need to stop doing? What are some things that are barriers to your learning in this class that would be helpful for me to discontinue? And finally, the start question, what are some things that I could be doing that I'm not that would enhance your learning experience here? Those open-ended questions are typically where you're going to get the most useful information. Once you've developed your survey questions, we would advocate that you give your surveys out during class, not asking them to take them home, but during typically the first 10 minutes of class, where you have the most captive audience, and you'll be able to get the most responses. So you can distribute your forms, ask your students to fill them out, and then leave them in an envelope that you kind of put aside for the rest of the class until you're ready to go back to your office and take a look to see what your students said. What you'll want to do when you get your results and you start sorting through them is to try to look for the trends that you see. It's sometimes easy to be distracted by the extreme comments, but what you really want to do are look for common themes. And once you've identified those, This is the key piece of informal early feedback, is going back to your class and debriefing with your students about the main points that you discovered. Tell them what you learned, some things that you can change, and some things that maybe are beyond your control to change. But having that conversation about their feedback, your response to that, and your rationale for the way you are making instructional decisions in your class will really help them understand where you're going with the class and see how they can best work with you to create a positive learning experience for them. If you have particular concerns about any of your feedback, or even if you don't and you just want to generate some creative ideas, please, we also think that it's a great idea if you can consult with a mentor or a colleague or a specialist in education on campus to help you keep your results balanced and also maybe move forward with thinking about some creative ways to respond to them. Finally, I have some references. The blue website, the Center for Teaching Excellence, has some more specific sample items and sample early feedback forms that you can download and adapt, as well as some more specific instructions on how to administer and interpret your results. So thank you, and I hope you consider trying this technique.